Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for the next session of our Spotlight on GitHub Advanced Security series. My name is Anna. I'll be your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I would love to turn it over to our speakers for today. Lupita and Chris, thank you so much for joining.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna, for that incredible introduction, as always. And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the GitHub Advanced Security Reactor series. I'm your host, Lupita Caraves, and with me today, I have a very special guest joining me from Semgrep as part of our Collaboration Over Compromise series. So before we get into introductions, though, I'd like to set the stage on what to expect. For those of you who are new here, Reactor serves as a platform to provide basically ungated content to the community, right? Some of these opportunities we've been given is to provide a space for you to learn and be informed about what's happening in the ever-evolving application security space. So I highly recommend folks to opt in to the GitHub notifications just to be the first to find out on what's happening. As we know, with all the news happening about application security today, I always like to just be open-minded and learn about what's happening. So if you can, please do. That's me casually saying like and subscribe. I started this series with one goal in mind, basically to provide that space for collaboration, right? Especially with everything going on, there's just no room for compromise. That's specifically my approach, my view. And I always say our competition isn't each other. It's the forces outside, the negativity, the approach, the hacking that really we want to prevent from happening. So GitHub has always stood to accelerate human progress, and our mission is to help develop the world's most secure, high quality, secure code possible. So to give you a little bit of background about who I am and sort of my approach and philosophy and where my opinions stem from, is that I, started my career as a software developer about 10 years ago. I was building the static engine in the application security space for IBM. And we started on-prem, moved to the cloud. And then I quickly realized that, different tools fulfill different needs depending on the organization's requirements, structure, the people, and the process. And I kind of went following through with like where I saw the trends of technology heading. I spent some time at Veracode, and then I quickly realized, well, GitHub is where everybody lives. And so that's what really interested me in collaborating with Semgrep, is that they are kind of like a plug and play solution for instances where we may not have an out of the box native experience for, let's say, a particular language or a particular feature. When we think about product development, there's a lot of moving parts as far as like the different customers that we cater to. And so being able to have that agility to pick and choose sort of what models or what scanners, if you will, you can use is really what I think the best approach to helping tackle the application security problem looks like. So with that being said, what we aim to do today is to guide you through like where we're at, where we see application security, why this matters, and then how you can use us better together in collaboration or pick and choose kind of like what works best for your systems. So with that, I'll let Chris introduce himself. I know I kind of went on with my whole spiel. And then after he introduced himself, we'll send it back to me to go over just like 4 slides, and then I'll hand it back over to him so you guys can learn about what they're doing. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Lupita. Thanks, Anna, for that nice introduction. So yeah, my name's Chris Morris. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Semgrep. Formerly, I was an AppSec engineer at a Fortune 50 company. So this is my first time in a pre-sales role. So what I did was I actually replaced legacy tooling with Semgrep. So I had the opportunity to go out and evaluate a lot of different providers in this space. And that's how I got introduced to Semgrep initially. And I have very strong feelings about reducing false positives for developers. Some of the applications or the code bases that we were scanning, they would generate, 5,000 to 7,000 findings on a scan and leaving a small team of developers to go and triage and do all of that work. And that was just something that didn't scale very well. So I would hear a lot of really unhappy and unsatisfied developers. I listened to their feedback, and I wanted to put something in place that would, make their lives easier, that would delight them, that would, take that burden off of them from having to try and do all of that triage work. Because what happens is either they're doing all of that triage work and it's slowing them down tremendously, and then they can't build functionality that generates revenue or lets them get, further down the line, right? Or they start to cut corners. I'm not saying this is happening everywhere, but I've worked with developers that would just kind of mark everything as a false positive and move on about their day. And so that, really erodes developer trust in the tools that you're using, and that becomes a very slippery slope very quickly. And speaking of slippery slopes, I am based in Michigan, which we're kind of known for having, freezing cold weather. Although right now it's starting to warm up, and this is kind of what we call Michigan fake summer. So even though it's still cold by most people's standards, we're outside in shorts and hoodies, and kids are riding bikes, and people have their barbecues out. And I think we just get super excited anytime, temperatures get above freezing.
Love that, Chris. And just so everyone knows, these sessions are live, right? So we're going to make mistakes. We don't go through and practice or overly produce this experience. It's meant to be sort of a collaborative, open space. So feel free to comment in the chat, ask any questions you may have. The format of this is very free form. There's no real structure. So if you aren't able to tune in, we also obviously have it on demand for you on YouTube and LinkedIn. So feel free to subscribe, like, and make sure that you're in the now with the notifications to receive further updates. With that, let me start off with just like setting the stage. I know I kind of sound like a brokered record if you've been on here before, but I always say AppSec has no silver bullet, right? It's really about finding sort of your approach and philosophy for the organization. So what does that mean? I mean, the real enemy here is security debt. As Chris mentioned, like a lot of times speed gets prioritized over security just for the sake of the experience. I don't know if you guys have noticed today, like just using any app on your phone, you can kind of tell which apps are being vibe coded and which ones are actually being developed in a strategic, structured way. I'll be playing with like a new application and I'll click on a button. And then if I do a sequence of events that isn't normal, it'll crash or I have to restart it. And so that's concerning, right? As far as like where app development is going. I know it's really cool to be able to think like you can just kind of take whatever new AI shiny toy is available and create whatever you want. But I think it's super important to still have like the engineering concepts in order to prevent like quality or security risks. Because we know that security debt impacts organizations. Almost every December, I have to sit down with a customer and work through some form of incident, like a secret expose, especially when it's like, online sales are just wilding because of all of the holiday activity. And so with that, there's various ways that you can kind of tackle this problem. And I think traditionally, to Chris's point, a lot of it has been an afterthought, right? Traditional tools have been not built in, but bolted on. And there's a lot of like the context switching. There's a lot of noise. I say this over and over again, and I don't know if it really sticks with folks, but when we look at like the way analysis done on like your first party code for static analysis is there's no right answer, right? It's an NP complete problem. So there's a lot of hallucination that's happening with like AI, and there has to be like a combination. The algorithm has to have more than just the approach of throwing AI at it. And that's one of the things that intrigued me about Semgrep and their philosophy and approach, because it aligns with what GitHub Advanced Security does. And before anyone says, well, like you guys kind of do the same things, it's like, yeah, but it's kind of like streaming services. You have HBO Max, you have Netflix, you have Amazon Prime. Like options are great in a world where there's so much diversity in how application security is being built. The key thing here is having a programmatic approach where you have the people, the process, and the tech to accomplish that shift left, to reduce the impact, the risk. And at the end of the day, it's really about like what you want the developers to experience, right? To Chris's point, tools become shelfware if they're not adopted, right? So we want to be a part of the developer's flow state. We want to build trust internally, externally. We don't just want to say use this because you have to. It's like understand what they need to succeed and providing that in order to boost productivity and innovation. So built in, not bolted on is the key. As you know, this is our suite of products. We have Dependabot out of the gate for every sort of enterprise user. But with that, we know there's some limitations and gaps, right? Our focus has primarily been on the code security, the secret protection. And while we're building our product features and functionality, it may not be available today, but that's where our technical alliances come really at play. So the AppSec marketplace is key component to our success. Having that single pane of glass, being able to integrate those results right within the GitHub so you don't have to context switch is probably my favorite point to point out. And so what we'll do now is actually hand it over to Chris. For those of you who've never heard of them or have dabbled and seen some stuff, I'd love to give him the stage to kind of showcase what they're doing. And then I'll come back at the end and we'll answer any questions that anyone has. And that's just keep it open. So any comments, feel free to pop them in and we'll take a minute to answer them. So with that, Chris, I'll hand it over to you to take the stage.
Chris, you are muted. That's right, folks. We are live.
I should be off mute now. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're good to go.
Wonderful. So this will be the only slide that I drag folks through today, and this is just for folks who haven't heard of Semgrep and the different features and capabilities that we offer. So we do have an AppSec platform, and this is really kind of the orchestration layer where you manage and tune your policies or groom your findings, or as a security team figure out which things you want to surface to your developers and how you want to prioritize those. You can also use this for developers, like they can access it too and get information as well, so it can kind of serve that dual purpose. But ideally, we want to integrate right with GitHub or other tools like that and surface findings there. For folks who've used our community edition, that's very popular within GitHub. So it's limited in its functionality, right? So those community rules can really only do single file, single function analysis, which means they're only going to be able to look at like one function within a file at a time. With our Pro engine, we can do cross-file, cross-function analysis, so we can semantically track the flow of data across your entire code base when we're doing the scan. We also offer managed scanning. So this is where we can actually clone your code over to our infrastructure and do the scan for you. We encrypt the code in transit. We encrypt it at rest. We just publish the metadata to our platform. So things like, file names and line numbers. And then after that, the agent that does the scan is destroyed. So we're not going to keep your code. We're not going to, retain your code. We're not going to train anything with your code or anything like that. It just makes onboarding really, really fast and seamless, but you can also deploy in your own CI or within GitHub Advanced Security, which I'll show you in just a couple of minutes. We do have Semgrep code, so this is what scans your first-party code, the things that your developers are writing. We have Semgrep supply chain, which scans your open source dependencies, the things that your code is pulling in, and then we have Semgrep secrets, which will look for and validate hard-coded secrets in your code. And then we also have Semgrep Assistant. So this is our AI LLM powered part of the platform that can do things like auto triage, auto remediation, click to fix, breaking change analysis for supply chain findings. So that's kind of our platform in an overview. From here, I'll jump into GitHub and show you kind of how you can export some of the Semgrep findings into the GitHub Advanced Security dashboard and why that's useful. So let me pivot over there. So ahead of time, I've kind of set up a repo with some vulnerabilities. I've done a Semgrep scan, and I've outputted those in serif format so that way they can be ingested into the Advanced Security dashboard. Now, the nice thing about GitHub Advanced Security, even though we have similar features, is Semgrep doesn't do everything. We're not an infrastructure as code scanner, so we have some support for Terraform and YAML, but we're not like a dedicated scanner. We're also not a DAS scanner. So I think it's really nice to have a place where you can group together all of your findings from different products and bake them all into your workflows or your actions as you're building out your applications. So this is just a view of what this would look like within GitHub Advanced Security. So because I'm leveraging the pro rules, we're actually able to do that cross-file, cross-function analysis, right? Which means we can, again, track that flow of data across your entire code base. This is going to be a lot stronger than just the community edition because we're going to uncover more true positive findings out of the box, even without using an LLM to do auto triage or things like that. And we're looking for specific cases where user-controlled data has come into your code base and where it's syncing somewhere else. So we call that taint mode analysis. What it does is it's really good for generating a high signal to low noise ratio just in terms of your static findings. So you can get some information here about what's going on and what we found. We're aiming to give the developer enough context to understand where the issue is in their code and why this is an issue. So this would be like an example of a supply chain finding. We also publish some references and some more information here, and I can go back to these results and I can look for, this would be an example of a code finding, right? And so I spoke earlier about that data flow analysis. So here you can actually show the paths, where this user controlled data is flowing through your code base, the different parts of your code base that are handling it, and ultimately, where it syncs, right? If you're leveraging our platform, so you already have the pro rules, you're already using them in your workflows, what you can do is you can actually come over to the code page, and I'll ignore priority for now, and you can do things like filter on, things that are true positives. So with up to 98% accuracy, we can tell if findings are true or false positives. So we're automating that work that's typically done by developers or AppSec engineers, people who have to manually review the code. We've now managed to automate that. So we're taking that work off of people's plates and so they can move on to more important things. You can also filter on, what's a false positive here. So I have not analyzed everything in this code base. This was just meant to be a quick example, just to show some of the features here. So I think I analyzed about 49 of the findings that we have here. And then you can see that Assistant thinks that this finding is a false positive. And it will give you some context as to why that's happening. And because this is dynamic for each finding, you're going to see this specific or unique to every finding that you're analyzing with Assistant. Please excuse my internet connection. There we go. So here we can see that Assistant thinks it's likely a false positive, and it's going to tell us why. But then, if we disagreed with this and this were a true positive, then, it would give us some context here. So one of the things we're able to do is some threat modeling with our findings. So we can tell you how an attacker or a bad actor might go about, exploiting this finding. And we give the scenario here just for richer context about the finding. And I'll show another example of this later, but we're calling out exactly in your code where the issue is. So what we're doing is we're dynamically fetching this from GitHub. We're pulling just this file into the platform for you to look at it and have a view at it, which is great for security administrators who don't necessarily have to go out to every project within GitHub. And then when you navigate away from this page, this file is destroyed. We're not going to keep it. We're not going to learn anything from it. And also with our AI providers, we have zero data retention agreements with them. So we're not going to allow them to, train any of their models with your code. If you want to, if you already have relationships with other AI providers, we also allow you to bring your own into the platform, which is really, really easy to do. You can just come over to Assistant, and then you can look for AI provider. And this is what we accept today. So if you have, your own OpenAI key or Google Gemini or XAI, you can just plug those in and you can use your own models. So pivoting over to like a pull request experience. So the scan I did was a full scan. It sent all the findings to the platform. It did all the cross-file, cross-function analysis on the entire code base. But whether you're scanning in CI or whether you're using like our managed scans, whenever your developers are creating pull requests, we can do a diff scan. where we're only going to scan the commits that make up the pull request. So the implication here is that these are going to be really fast. These are generally going to run, within 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the size of the pull request. It's going to be extremely contextual because we're only scanning the commits that make up the pull request. We're not going to surface findings to the developers that have been in the code for a long time, weeks, months, or years. It's going to be related to just the code that they've touched in this pull request. We will, similar to how we've seen in the advanced security dashboard, we will highlight the code that has an issue. So here we can see that, there are some SQL strings being concatenated and returned in this query method here. So there will be some messaging from the rule here, again, aiming to give the developer enough context to understand what is going on and how they should go about fixing this issue. This messaging is completely customizable, so you can change the messaging. You can add your own wiki links or your own customized fixes, things how you want your developers to fix things, or give them as much context as you think they need. Again, we're also able to do some threat modeling here, where we explain how an attacker would go about exploiting this specific scenario by using this vulnerable query method in the example. And then we also provide a data flow graph similar to how we've seen in the advanced security dashboard. So you can see where that user controlled data is coming into your application. You can see the different parts of your code base that are handling that data, and ultimately where it syncs in the vulnerable query method. We're also able to do auto remediation, where we can generate the fix for your developers. So we generally feel that this auto remediation, if it's not perfect, and it's usually perfect, about 95% of the time they work as suggested. If they don't work as suggested, you can actually fix them. You can customize those fixes through what we call assistant memories. I'll show you more about that in just a second. But if you agree with it, then you can just commit the suggestion. Your pull request would be rescanned, and you could move on about your day. We also provide step-by-step instructions. So if you want to do the manual work, you certainly can. And then if you wanted to ignore this finding, this is something that you can do right from the platform. So we give you, some shorthand comments here, sort of like false positive or accepted risk or other. And then the developer could actually disposition this finding all within GitHub without having to go to other tools or things like that. So it's just incredibly efficient, keep them working right where they're coding, and so they can go on, developing more features. On the supply chain side, we do something called reachability analysis. So this is, it goes a step further. A lot of tools like Dependabot are really good about telling you when there's a CVE within a dependency, right? But they don't necessarily or can't necessarily tell you if you're invoking that dependency in a vulnerable way. So here what we'll do is we'll highlight your first party code that shows how you're invoking that dependency in a vulnerable way, as well as give an explanation as to why this is reachable. I know a lot of teams generally do this work manually, where they disposition a lot of findings because a lot of times you're not actually invoking that library or that dependency in a vulnerable way. Just because there's a CVE associated with it doesn't mean that it's a danger to your application, at that time. Right? So this is just a really good way to save on a lot of work and help teams prioritize the findings that matter. We also do license enforcement, so you can block open source licenses that may pose legal risk to your organization. This is also something you can configure within the platform. And then something I'm really excited about, because I requested it when I was still a customer of Semgrep, is breaking change analysis. So now, when I was an AppSec engineer, I used to get a lot of friction from developers around, upgrading dependencies, right? Well, we don't know what's changed, and it could break the application. So now, using Semgrep Assistant, we're able to do some of that analysis for you. So using click to fix and things like upgrade guidance, as an AppSec engineer in our platform, you could go through, you could filter on things that are safe to upgrade, and then you could say, submit a PR from Semgrep to go bump the version on all these things and kind of tackle low-hanging fruit very, very easily, right? Conversely, we can also show when we think there are breaking changes. Right? So here we're saying, yeah, there are 2 functions in use that are unchanged, so those aren't an issue. But here we can also tell you that there are 2 functions with parameter changes, and we can tell you where exactly in your code you're calling them and what you need to go change before, so your application doesn't break. So again, I know other folks are doing things similar to this, but I'm just really excited to see it in any form, because when I was a practitioner, this was a source of a lot of developer friction in my environment. Pivoting over to our platform, and this is our demo environment, I could show you just how powerful some of these filtering capabilities can be. Again, waiting on my slow internet connection in my frozen state. And it could also be that my session is just stale and I need to refresh things. Perfect. So you can see in our little demo org, we have, almost like 9,800 findings, a little over 9,800 findings. If I come down, I can filter on things like assistant true positive, so I can get rid of all of the false positives, that we've done analysis on pretty quickly. We're also able to do some risk assessment for you using Assistant. So if we see markers in the code that relate to any of these categories, we'll go ahead and flag those findings as high risk. And you could also see low risk findings here. And this is the criteria we use to determine if something is low risk. So I'll just filter on high risk. If you are using Palo Alto Cortex or Sysdig, we have bidirectional integrations with them. So Assistant can sometimes tell if something is internet facing or if it's in a deployed status. But if you have those other integrations, then we can get much richer context within the platform. And then you can also focus on severity. So as a former engineer, I would probably focus on things that I think are true positives, things that are high risk, and things that are critical severity. And I went from almost 10,000 findings to 12 pretty quickly. Now, the idea here is not that you don't have to fix everything. It's more, this is a great place to start. Like, as you're thinking about the findings that are most important to surface to your developers outside of pull request comments and things like that, these are the types of filters that you could leverage to get to the most critical findings as quickly as possible. Switching gears just a little bit, you can also use Assistant to audit behavior or give it better context. So if I come and I filter on things that are a false positive, I can also filter on things that Assistant thinks is a true positive. Now, in this scenario, one of two things likely happened. Either the developer has dispositioned something, on accident. They've said it's a false positive when it's really a true positive. So now you can kind of audit that behavior, or at least see, if that's an issue. I would say, Assistant auto triage is very good. It's highly accurate. So if your developer says that it's a false positive and Assistant thinks it's a false positive, then I would say, you should feel very comfortable dispositioning that finding and not spending any more time on it. But if there's a discrepancy, this is where we have a chance to do better. We can either, reach out and tap that developer on the shoulder, or ping them or DM them and try to ask them what's going on. Am I missing something, or perhaps they missed something, right? So now you can kind of close the gap on that. Or Assistant is missing context and it just doesn't know enough about the code base or the finding. We've seen this example before, my other little org that I was sharing out from the GitHub Advanced Security dashboard, but you can see it's highlighting this request data object, right? If we look further at the code and unpack this a little more, we can see that it's being sent to this utils.clean function and stored in sanitized data. So this would be, like a use of a custom sanitizer, right? Lots of organizations have these. They're not necessarily using something out of the box. So one of the ways that you could deal with this is you could come into the rule. So editing rules, creating custom rules is very, very easy. If we come down here, one of the ways that you could deal with this, and I would probably recommend it for this type of issue, would be just to add a new pattern sanitizer for utils.clean. Then the next time the rule runs, it won't pick up issues like this. It'll recognize that sanitizer, and you can move on about your day and remove false positives like that. Sometimes use cases are a little bit more complex. Either way, it's just easier to use an assistant memory. So you can come into this panel and using natural language, you can tell Semgrep Assistant how you want it to behave or how you want it to treat certain findings. If we look at this last one, it says functions named cleanse, sanitize, clean, or similar indicate that user-controlled data has been properly cleansed. Utils.clean is one such function. And now you can see the scope. There's 192 findings that have been affected by this. So the other way that I could say this is, if you're shifting left and you're surfacing things in the form of PR comments, you want to be very confident that your findings are true positives before you ever surface them to a developer. So there's a setting in our platform that, if Assistant thinks something is a false positive, either through its own analysis or through memory, it won't send that PR comment. So this would be 192 times a PR comment hasn't been sent for something that we're pretty confident is a false positive. You can scope these to all projects or individual projects. You can scope them to all rules or specific rules, whatever makes the most sense. And this doesn't just have to be related to like custom sanitizers or other things you're doing in code. I would also give the guidance that if you're using a web application firewall or you have some other mitigating or compensating control in place and you're comfortable that that is, meeting your security needs, then you can give Assistant that context as well. And then it won't flag those issues in your code anymore. So we do have a lot of customers who have gotten to 0 false positives in their SaaS scans just by training Assistant and building out their specific organizational context. And you can see some of the impact on some of these findings is pretty huge, right? So over 7,000 findings have been affected by this one. You'll also see this suggested tab up here. We don't have any suggested memories in our demo org right now, unfortunately, but the way that that works is when your developers are going through and triaging findings and they're giving, really good triage comments, what Assistant will do is it will try and suggest a memory based on their triage activities. It will, apply a scope, and it will try to make the memory a little bit clearer to the LLM. And you'll get a chance to review it here, and you can adjust the scope, you can adjust the memory, or you can even scope it based on project tags now, which is kind of new and I'm excited about. I can talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But once you agree with what Assistant's trying to do, you can activate the memory. It'll pop over here, and then it will know that context going forward, and you'll never have to triage the same false positive twice. Looking at our supply chain capabilities, I'm going to come over here to all findings for just a second. I'm not saying to ignore priority. So this is the default priority, based on our settings in our demo org. You can save this and decide what is priority for your organization. So using something like reachability analysis, where we know that findings are reachable in code, we're able to filter out a significant number of findings right out of the gate and focus on things that we know are reachable or that we know are issues in your code. So yeah, I dropped almost 5,000 findings by focusing on just what's reachable. So again, helping teams reduce that backlog, reduce that noise, and spend more time working on the things that we know we need to go fix. One of the other things that we use in our platform, and I highly recommend, is the exploit probability scoring system, or EPSS. So I would always focus on things that have a high EPSS score, regardless of their severity. Right, these are things that I would want to know about and make sure are fixed. Again, we have some of those integrations here, so you can filter on deployment status, you can filter on things that are high risk. And then, I might also focus, as a starting point, just on critical severity. You can see upgrade guidance is also something that you can filter on here. So again, if you were looking to go after low-hanging fruit, you could click on safe, and then using like click to fix, which is some new functionality that we've just released or are planning on releasing, you could just go submit all of those PRs to address all of those issues very, very quickly. So we went from, over 6,000 findings to 11 findings with just a few filters that we know are high risk, critical severity. We know they're reachable in code, so that's something that we have to go fix right away. And yeah, so again, we feel that this can really save teams a lot of work and just really help expedite, security within your organization. Looking at our dependencies page, so we have reachability coverage on 12 different languages, including PHP. I think we might be the only vendor that has coverage for PHP. But sometimes there'd be like a 0-day exploit, right? And our security researchers are awesome about writing our reachability rules. So usually within 24 to 48 hours of all new advisories, whether they're GitHub or CVEs or malware advisories, we're going to have reachability rules within the platform. But before we have them, it might be good to know your exposure for like a 0-day exploit. So using the dependency page, you could come in here and you could filter for a dependency name and version, and that will pull up a list of your projects that are using it, so you can know your exposure in just a few seconds. One of the other things that I'm really excited to show people about is our AI detection. So we have rules for detecting the usage of AI in your code. We have a shadow AI rule set, which can detect, LLM usage in your code. We have an MCP server rule set, which can detect, the usage of MCP servers in your code. But then we can also use AI itself to detect other things not commonly found by SaaS tools, things like IDORs or improper authorization or logic flaw issues. These are the types of things that are generally found in bug bounty programs or external pen tests. And there are a number of LLM only tools out there that do this type of work. But because our detection capabilities are backed by our rules, we find that we're able to find about 70% more true positives than some of the other LLM only approaches, because the LLM has richer context. It's backed by those rules that we have in place. So if we click on one of these findings, we get a description. It's telling us what's going on here. It's showing us the issue in the code. And then it's going to, again, like we've seen in GitHub, recommend a fix for that issue. So one of the things that I would always suggest, typical rules, SaaS rules, like out of the box, they can produce a lot of false positives for these types of findings. But something that we've now been able to do is we've been able to create a Claude Code skill that actually helps write Semgrep rules. So in this example, I did take one of these IDORs that we were able to find with our AI detection, and I gave it the code, exactly where this IDOR was found, right? And then I gave it a description of the finding as well as the recommended fix, and I've asked it to write a Semgrep rule to look for these patterns in the remaining code base. So you don't have to rely on bug bounty programs or pen testers to find them one at a time. Once you know what the pattern looks like, you can craft a rule and look for it in the rest of your code base at scale. And so it'll start creating this rule, and it'll also start creating the test cases. One of the first things it notices is that there are no test cases. So it's going to create them for you. In the past, anyone who's like familiar with writing Semgrep rules, that could be a little bit of trial and error, because you want it to have test cases that fail and you want to have other ones that pass, when you know it's good. And that can take a little bit of time, especially when folks are new to it. And we're always happy to help folks. So you can reach out to us through, Slack or email or some of our other methods for getting a hold of us. But we're happy to help you write rules to find the things that you care about. So now it's generated some test cases, but they're not returning correctly. So it's going to continue to iterate over them and make them better until, eventually there are fewer issues. Now there's only one issue, so it's fixed that. Now it's telling us all tests have passed. And here it's going to explain, what the rule is. It's given it a name. This will be the files that it's created. So it's given us the rule itself as well as the test cases. It's going to explain how the rule works. So, what types of patterns we're matching, what it catches, and it'll even go through and explain the limitations of this rule and how you might have to massage it to make it perform better within your own policy. Speaking of policies, that is also very easy to manage within the platform. So by default, all of your rules, from Semgrep are going to be in monitor mode, which means you're not going to get that PR comment. So you'll get all the findings in the platform for your security team's visibility, but we're not necessarily going to interrupt that developer or break their workflow with a comment or a block. You can change rule modes pretty easily. You just select the rules that you want to start commenting or blocking on. And then from there, you'll start to actually generate those PR comments where developers will, their workflow will be interrupted. You can give them the context they need, let them know they're potentially introducing an issue, and that's something that, they should probably not do. And they'll get all the remediation guidance and everything they need to hopefully fix that issue within GitHub and stop and not allow your production backlog of findings to grow anymore. So the idea is we want to shrink that backlog over time. We want to shift left. We want to put secure guardrails in place. We want to nudge developers to fix things before they're in production. I think generally it's about 80% cheaper to fix things in a pre-prod or test environment before they're in production. And that's assuming that there hasn't been a data breach or anything like that. So again, you could, maybe filter on like critical severities that have a high confidence, or maybe you've already have some findings in the platform that are concerning, and you've made some decisions about, hey, this is where we want to start intercepting developers. So then you could just change modes on those rules pretty easily. You can also add new rules to your policy out in our registry. So here we have a number of rule packs outside of our default rule set. The default rule set is curated by our security research team to be the highest signal to lowest noise ratio out of the box, to find the things that we know should basically never happen in code. And with a high degree of confidence that these are true positives. But you can also use things that are more like in the audit category. So if you really want to go deep and you want to uncover every little finding, in your code, we give you the ability to do that. And then you can also back that with Semgrep Assistant. So that way you can rule out a lot of those false positives and not spend time looking at them. Searching for specific rule sets. I mentioned Shadow AI earlier. I know some folks are very interested in that. So you could click on the rule set itself. You can get an idea of what's in here. You can also contribute to the registry, or you can have your rules privately hosted, whatever is better for you. And then in one click, you can just add these to your policy in whatever mode you'd like to run them in. So again, you can customize these for your use cases. If you just want to have a good understanding of what is being used by your developers. If you want to block them from using, unsanctioned models or rogue MCP servers, that's completely possible as well. Looking at supply chain, well, I'll look at license configuration first. So this is just where we allow you to, take action on licenses that you may want to block or comment on as developers are creating pull requests. This will actually interrupt their workflow and let them know they might be putting your organization in some kind of legal risk. Within the findings policies, you can, and again, this is really managing how your developers are engaging with the rules and how you're going to surface things to them in PRs. So looking at this one, we can see that, when severity is critical or high, and we know that there's some kind of reachability involved, either things are always reachable because they're, associated with some kind of malicious dependency, or they're reachable in code, or they're conditionally reachable. So what this means is sometimes there's like an operating system or framework version involved that we can't learn through the code scan. So we would flag those items as conditionally reachable. Most of your findings will either be reachable or unreachable. It's generally a small percentage of things that are either unknown or conditionally unreachable. And then we're also saying when an upgrade is available, go ahead and block and leave a comment, right? Because we know there's an upgrade available of that library, and we don't want to allow the developer to, merge that into production. So supply chain supports multi-policy out of the box, so you can take advantage of all of those reachability rules, even within, GitHub Advanced Security or however you're running Semgrep. And then one of the last things I'll show is our dashboard. So you can see we have priority enabled. So really what we're doing here is we're giving teams or security champions an overview of the health of your program. So as I talked about, this would be like your open backlog. So not the things that you're surfacing in pull requests, but the things that have been in the code for a long time. And when you start using Semgrep, ideally, you want to see this start to flatten out and start trending down. We can show you what that activity looks like, whether things are being provisionally ignored by Semgrep Assistant because, with a high degree of confidence, we feel that they're false positives, whether they're being fixed in PRs, which, we want developers to, take those nudges, right? Which is what we call secure guardrails. So here you can see, these are provisionally ignored. The green is showing that, hey, this was actually fixed in a PR, right? And that's wonderful. Or you can see if in light green, if things are ignored in a PR. Ideally, you won't see too much of that. Ideally, you want your developers to have a lot of confidence in the things that are being surfaced to them. We want them to have a lot of trust in the tool and know that anything that's being surfaced to them is actionable and does need to be fixed. And then we also help teams call out, which findings or which projects have the most findings and how long those findings are staying open over time. So sometimes developers or teams need, a little bit more nudging to go fix these issues. And this will just help you know whose shoulder you have to tap and maybe how hard you have to tap it. In the projects page, you can group your projects by tags, which I recommend doing. So maybe you have a set of repos that make up some mission critical applications, and you want to organize them logically that way. You can create memories scoped on tags, you can create policies scoped on tags, and then you can also do other things. You can extract your findings from the API based on tags. So it's really, really flexible in terms of what you can do. So here I'm looking for product A. And so you can see we just have two repos tagged with that specific tag. And so this just allows you to be, like I said, really flexible in terms of what you're looking for, how you're scanning for things, and how you're scoping things. When you use Semgrep Managed Scans, onboarding is super easy. So again, you can run completely in your own CI. You can run in GitHub Actions. You can export all of that in Seraph and ingest it all in the GitHub Advanced Security dashboard, which is great. Or if you want to take a more automated approach, you can use Semgrep Managed Scans. It does come at no additional cost when you buy Semgrep, so you get access to all of those Semgrep Pro rules. You get access to AI detection. You get access to Semgrep Assistant that can do that auto triage for you, that can do that code remediation for you. And you also can leverage managed scans on top of what you're doing in CI. So when you have a large organization, sometimes it can be really challenging to get your developers to go out and actually change all their CI jobs. You might have to write some automation to go do it. But if you're looking just to get scanning really, really quickly, this is something that you can put in your toolkit and use it as is out of the box. And so what it'll do is every PR targeting the default branch, it will go ahead and scan that one. And if you're in comment mode, then it would, interrupt the developer's workflow with that comment, letting them know what's going on. It will also do weekly full scans on your production branch or on your default branch. And it'll do all that cross-file, cross-function analysis and surface all those legacy findings that have been in the code for a long time. And then you can do things like analyze them with Assistant, understand the risk associated with them, understand, if they're false positives, and then you can make really intelligent decisions about how you want to surface those findings and which findings you want to surface. It's really, really easy to scan with Semgrep Managed Scans. So if you wanted to scan more projects, you could select them here, or you could select them one at a time, and then you could just enable scans on them, and then or in the settings under source code managers, you can just come, enable auto scan, and it'll automatically scan any new repos in the way that I described, just a few seconds ago. And then you don't have to set up anything. It'll just catch all new ones, enroll them in Semgrep Managed Scans, and then you don't have to worry about it. And then one of the other things I wanted to talk about, and then I will, release everyone here. If you wanted to, I think we already did this. Yes, Semgrep Assistant, you can bring your own AI provider. We also have zero data retention, so you could click on this and find out exactly what that means, or you could reach out to our team if you have more questions. But this is really, the bulk of what Semgrep is and what I wanted to show you today. And we have a lot more stuff planned, which I'm really excited about. So I hope that we can definitely help bridge gaps where there are, and ultimately help teams find and fix issues, because at the end of the day, I think that's what's most important, regardless of the tooling that you're using.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome job, Chris. Hopefully that was informative for everyone tuning in or everyone watching later on demand. again, I always say collaboration over compromise. And when we look at just like the landscape of where application security is heading, you think about what just came out in the news, right? I mentioned this a couple of times kind of vaguely, but I think this problem is bigger than just what tool. There's also the program, the people, the process, the adoption. And the more coverage, the better, right? I know consolidation has kind of always been the key thing, but just with the pace of which applications are being developed, I think it's super important to prioritize security and safety over, other things, if you will. So that's my intent. Again, these are my personal opinions. The Microsoft Reactor series serves as a way to show ungated content to the community. So thank you, Chris, so much for hopping in and guiding us through the approach and philosophy that Semgrep takes. And really, I know we have a couple accounts that we're working on in collaboration because there's no silver bullet. So I really appreciate it. Now we'll open it up to the public to see if there's any questions, comments, or anything they'd like us to dive in deeper on in these last 5 or 10 minutes.
And I would just say feedback is always welcome, whether it's positive or negative. I would always take any feedback back to our teams and continue to make things better on our end as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I know some of these live sessions can be, tough to get your questions answered. So just remember, if you do opt in, we will get your email information and can provide you further details on what we're doing here. As you know, or those of you who don't know, every 2 weeks we have a session. Next session is going to be in Spanish for our Latin American viewers. And then after that, we'll actually, we rescheduled the advanced security on ADO. So I know we were supposed to have that 2 weeks ago. We had a glitch in the system, but she'll be back on March 25th. So for those of you on ADO, you'll want to tune in there for all things advanced security. So I don't see any questions, comments, or concerns in the chat. So I think we can go ahead and wrap things up. But appreciate you all for tuning in. Feel free to share the recorded version once it goes live, but I'll hand it over to Chris to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. I hope you got something good out of this. I hope you learned a little bit more about Semgrep, and I hope ultimately we can all work to make everything more secure and stop the bad guys. So thanks for joining. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.